This is a very important evening for the Minister of Power Energy, and particularly power energy sector and also Sri Lankan economy as a whole. We all are aware that the power sector, energy sector, is the most important aspect of the economy. If you manage the energy sector efficiently, the rest of the economy can be improved. Recognizing the importance of the energy sector, the Minister of Power Energy has embarked on an ambitious mission, which is to achieve the self-sufficiency in energy through 100% renewable sources. This obviously needs an enormous amount of technology, skills, research, and innovations. Today, we just launched the International Symposium on Energy, Challenges in the Knowledge Economy, as a key strategy to address the technological, policy, and economic challenges in the energy sector. This will be the platform for the technologists, researchers, and the policymakers to work together. Fortunately, we are privileged to inaugurate this energy sector key milestone with the blessing of His Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam, former President of India. Your Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam, on behalf of the Government of Sri Lanka and the Minister of Power and Energy, I warmly welcome you and with gratitude for accepting our invitation to inauguration of this important symposium. Your Excellency, you are not a stranger to Sri Lanka. You are in the hearts and minds of many Sri Lankans. We fully recognize the contribution you have made to the humanity by way of science, technology, and philosophy and research. Most importantly, your contribution for the development of children to bring the peace in the world is highly appreciated. Honorable Sir, thank you for gracing this occasion. We welcome you to Sri Lanka and this event. Honorable Minister, Honorable Padli Champika Ranawaka, we value your contribution and dedication to the energy sector by taking the difficult challenge to transform Sri Lanka to energy self-sufficient nation. You are the driver of this symposium. This is your vision. So, Honorable Sir, we warmly welcome you to this evening. Honorable Ministers and Members of Parliament and other political leaders, your participation at this event demonstrates your support to Honorable Padli Champika Ranawaka and the Power Energy team to achieve the great mission of becoming Sri Lanka a self-sufficient energy nation. Your participation definitely encourages us. On behalf of the Ministry, I welcome your Excellencies to this important symposium. Distinguished dignitaries, your Excellencies and ambassadors and members of the foreign missions, donor organizations, you have been behind us always for many years in the development of the energy sector. I welcome you with gratitude for this symposium. Your participation at this symposium is highly valuable. Secretaries of ministries, government officials, corporate leaders, researchers, academics, media, security personnel, and distinguished participants. Every one of you make a valuable contribution to our national mission of achieving energy self-sufficiency by participating in this event. Your participation encourages us to engage in more research and technology activities that the nation wants most. We are fortunate to have several international experts and researchers with us here in this evening to present papers at the symposium tomorrow. Particularly, I wish to warmly welcome Professor Peter Hegg, University of Applied Sciences of Germany, Professor Saravana Muttaya of University of Malaysia this evening. We have received more than 100 scientific and academic papers for this symposium. This is a great achievement. We have been able to achieve this success within a very short period. We have here with us the authors and researchers who have present their papers tomorrow. We also have here officers for Ministry of Power and Energy and the officers of the institution under the ministry and also the symposium organizing committee. I welcome all of you this evening. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you very much.
The Ministry of Power and Energy, having adopted a policy framework for planning and development of energy sector of Sri Lanka recently, has envisioned a nation self-sufficient in energy by 2025. This would mean an energy-empowered nation, which has been our theme for this program, which will rely on domestic source of energy by stopping import of very costly, expensive hydrocarbons. While the dependence on these non-renewable energy sources is to be reduced drastically, the domestic requirements are to be supplied by indigenous energy sources like LNG deposits that we recently found in the basin of Mannar. At present, approximately 50% of our country's annual export earnings are eaten up by the costly energy resource import. The Ministry of Power and Energy is increasingly moving towards evidence-based policy. This is a clear shift from ad hoc, top-down ways of policy making, dramatic system of governance as they reach maturity, increasingly rely on systematically analyzed data. Such data come from organized research, expert teamwork, and institutional collaborations. The Ministry of Power and Energy, together with its principal energy arms such as Ceylon Electricity Board and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, is organizing this international symposium on evolving energy challenges in the knowledge economy. The symposium will provide a forum for local and invited foreign experts in the field to discuss, debate, and share futuristic knowledge relevant to the challenges that the nation is facing in the evolving economy. The objective of the symposium is to facilitate a rich exchange of knowledge among energy policy makers, researchers, academia, and industry who seek solutions to problems of energy economy, sustainability of sources, and effectiveness in energy use in the economy. This would enable the ministry to formulate programs and projects on the basis of evidence collected systematically for the effective implementation of its current development plan. The technical sessions tomorrow will be at the Miloda, which is Academy of Financial Studies at Bristol Street, the former Times building, Colombo Fort. There will be a large number of technical papers presenting various energy sector which are organized into 6 areas. I take the opportunity to recognize the presence of presenters from Germany, Malaysia, China, and India in particular. The symposium on energy is the first of its kind held in Sri Lanka. The response from the professionals, academics, and research community has been very, very encouraging. While I thank all of them on behalf of the steering committee and look forward to a successful technical session tomorrow. Thank you all.
Well, my campus is a zero-emission campus. We are using only renewables. Basically, we belong to a bigger university in Trier, and we are located in the southwest part of Germany. And we are using solar energy, of course. We are using thermal energy, geothermal energy, and we are using our organic household waste to produce heat, cold electricity for 2,800 people. We are never freezing. We are never cold, and our lights always are on, if we like. So, 100% is possible, technically feasible, and we are not paying more than any other place in Germany. So to get rid of one fairy tale with regard to renewables, you can organize them very, very reliable and very, very affordable. Well, one thing I want to share with you, renewables add value compared to fossil energies, which are actually stealing value from you. They add value because they give people, normal people, the possibility to engage themselves in renewable, sustainable business. When we took our waste and used it for energy supply, something very interesting happened in a quite poor region in Germany. We created 35 new jobs, we invested a lot of money, we are totally energy independent from our environment, we have an innovative place, and we are sustainable. And we are not paying any euro cent more for this. This is what we call material flow management. You have a flow which is very stupidly managed, you take it and you start to properly manage it, and suddenly you have values, a lot of values, cash values and idealistic values. So our philosophy is in IFERS, my institute, no waste, no wastewater, 100% renewables, basically, so that we can follow an old idea which comes from a German mayor from the 19th century. He was one of the founders of the cooperative movement. He said a very interesting sentence. He said, the money of the village should be in the village. And this only can happen if the villagers have the chance to use their own energies, solar, biomass, water, and efficiency. We must enable them to do so, and suddenly you have a new economy. It's a locally renewable energy-based economy, and they are adding permanent value instead of being trained of values. Well, example, a village in Germany, 300 houses, 700,000 euro energy costs a year. Increasing 4% a year at least. Salaries only increase 2%. Though the people are losing purchasing power every year, they're getting poorer. They leave the village. What can they do? They can't stop spending and start investing in their own human and resource capacities. And suddenly they turn the wheel. Suddenly they own a system, and suddenly they decide about energy costs. This creates a kind of local green economy. And the funny thing is, renewable energies, they actually have 90% capital costs and 10% operation costs. Fossils, they have 80% capital costs and 80% operation costs and 20% capital costs. Means renewable energies are very nice to be calculated for the future, mainly capital costs. So we are creating 400 bioenergy villages in Germany, and another 500 are planned, enabling people to invest in their own environment. Invest, not only working in the environment, no, they're investing, they're getting money out of it, and the other rewards from having a safe environment. If you do this in a small village, economically many things happen. And people did not believe us when we first did these calculations. We are microeconomists at my institute. If people start to invest in their potentials and start to save on fossils and start to have revenues from investing in fossils, then suddenly we have something what we call regional added value, which exactly can calculate for 10 years and 20 years. And here in this slide you see, for 10 years, if people invest in this village in their renewable energy potential, they can have 14 million euro investment and 10 million euro added value in a small village. This would be not so much in Sri Lanka, but it would also happen there. We did some studies already in this beautiful country. So people can add to your energy problem and positively add, and they can make revenues from this. In Germany now we have 1.5 million people who are energy producing. The energy totally changed. People now are the energy producers, no longer the few big companies. It's in people's hand. It's a democratic development of energy supply. So why do we need it? This is what we're normally doing. We have a system, we ignore all the potentials, even the human potentials, and we have a throughput society. Grab and throw, use inefficiently in between. We change it to a system like this. Look what you have, map it, use it, put it into projects, and only purchase what you don't have in your own village, especially with regard to energy. And suddenly you see the villages and the villagers being a totally new species. They are proud to be, even in rural areas. Well, potential for 100% renewable, there are a lot. I'm not going to talk today, no time, about water, wastewater, waste, buildings, tourism. I'm talking a little bit about renewable energies. But the list you see here, there's a long list of things you can do. You can immediately start. When you start to map your potentials, this we did 10 years ago in Germany, you come up with a significant amount of oil equivalents you have from biomass, from solar, from geothermal, from wind, from water. And if you have these potentials mapped and it's obvious and you put a business plan on it, then suddenly the people start to see what they have. Urban mining, you don't have to import coal from nowhere. The coal is in your villages and in your villagers. And that's the basic message what I can tell you from many projects all over the world, especially also from Germany. Well, just waste. You know, there's so many waste just coming from India and Bhutan and going by bus and by car, and I see waste everywhere. Poor people throwing waste because they think they are too poor to invest in technology. No, they are poor because they're not investing in technologies. Biomass is a pure energy source. 1 ton is 50 liters of oil and 600 kilogram fertilizer. In Sri Lanka, if you think about your waste, it's at least something like 46 million cubic meter natural gas you have just in your municipal solid household waste, organic part. It's there. You have it. You're throwing it. You could use it. Well, energy is related to closely looking. If you look closer, you get enlightened. In Germany, we did a lot of these things, and we're discussing now, are we too ambitious with our targets? Are we too expensive? Can we not afford what we are doing? And are we too quick? So, well, to answer this question very quickly, we have a lot of studies done. Fraunhofer, you may know, a very famous research institute. They answer the question very simple. If we do it right now and directly, don't wait, we are saving money immediately. These 2 studies, which are here shown on the slides, show you exactly. They calculated investing in renewables, capital cost, operation cost, compared to the yearly 80 billion euro fossil energy investment in Germany is a business. And we get the added value on top, and we get the climate protection on top. Well, we don't believe maybe Germany is too rich. They can do it. Okay, let's have a short look at Africa. We just finished a study for Cape Verde, emerging country in front of Senegal, an island country. We did a 100% renewable energy study, and the result you see here. The 2 upper lines is their 2-day costs, LCOE, levelized cost of energy. And the pillars you have, this is the costs if they had what they had, if they changed to 100% renewable. You see, we are cheaper, immediately cheaper than fossil. So don't be fooled. It's a question of full cost calculation, proper use of technology, and proper management, and then we can do it. Message from a 100% renewable energy campus. Germany is still wasting 80 billion euro every year on fossil, non-sustainable, non-peaceful energy supply. But we started to switch. We are also already now 9 billion, saving 9 billion euro because of renewable energy use. And we are reducing this import every day, every year. Well, many people think Germans are doing this because they are rich and they can afford to do so. They think it's a kind of ecological hobby. Don't be fooled. We are not so stupid. We are business-like. And this chart shows the business model of the renewable energy change in Germany. And it's really simple. I could draw the same thing for Sri Lanka, for many parts in Africa. The first part of the chart shows investment. It's a limited thing because renewables have capital costs and when they are paid, they work. And the second part of the chart, the right side, shows the payback you get. And this is an open system. You get payback forever if you start in renewables, invest in renewable energies. So we have a clear business idea behind this. That's why our parliament, all parties are supporting it. Left, right, green, yellow, all. There's nobody really opposing it. We're discussing about incremental things. Well, and you see why we can do this. Left chart, the development of the costs of renewable energies, and the other chart showing you basically the development of our feed-in tariff. Feed-in tariff goes down because renewable energy is getting cheaper. And the generation costs of renewable energies are going down compared to the fossil cost is going up. So the upper black line going up and the other lines all going down. This is in every country the same. Maybe you can talk about 10 years, 12 years, 5 years, but it's the same. And then if you have this, you have a kind of business case. Grid parity, long ago in Germany, 3 years ago, grid parity, so if you install solar energy today, you're saving money immediately. If you talk about storage, I bring this slide because we have a nice cooperation in Sri Lanka. We are going to produce an electric car based on a Sri Lankan technology. We convert it to electric engine. Also, we show how we can use batteries twice. A battery in a car for driving, and then when the car is not driving, we can use this battery as a kind of buffer for our fluctuating renewable energies. Well, if we talk about an example, you have here in Sri Lanka coal power plant. We also were very fond of coal power plants when we were 20 years ago. I'm grown up in a region where there was a lot of coal. When we started to realize that coal is actually not really sustainable and not really cheap. So we made a lot of calculations, and also we are doing a calculation here which I want to share with you. First of all, some people think fossil energies are getting cheaper. This never happened in this world. Actually, cheaper means sustainably cheaper. So if you look into the last 20, 30 years, they always increased in price with fluctuation. They're oscillating a little bit, but in average they're getting more expensive, and renewables are doing the opposite. So if you look into the so-called LCOE of renewables, which you could use to totally substitute a coal power plant, means you take the coal power plant, you dismantle it, and you install solar and wind and batteries. Then depending on the coal price, of course, you can define a levelized cost of energy, means what would be the substitute price. And you see this little chart on the lower left side, you see the levelized cost of energy for solar, then wind. On the very right side, you see the costs of the system, including storage. We just took pumped hydro, and then you see the costs of a coal power plant. And you have the average cost of coal over the last 10 years, and you use this for the calculation, then a full renewable energy system, including storage, is not more expensive than a coal power plant. The only difference is this is fully 100% adding value to Sri Lanka and its people. And you are energy independent. No matter what happens outside the world, you can do it yourself. And on top, you can use carbon credits. There's a big conference coming up in Paris where people, again, are thinking about what can we do to keep the 2-degree target. And they're always ending up with nonsense. It would be very, very nice if this island country or others, just coming from Bhutan, they also want to contribute to something like this, coming up with new ideas to offer these people in Paris. They have money but no ideas. I think you have ideas, not so much money. This could be a nice complementary talk if you go there. Well, what are the problems? There are, of course, problems. We need high investment and economy of scale to achieve low LCOE. So stop being shy, stop doing pilot projects, stop talking about 100 kilowatt systems and 500 kilowatt systems, talk about gigawatt. Then you get a nice price, you get immediately lower LCOE, and then you will very quickly forget about coal. Strong fossil lobby fighting still for their stakes, okay, then involve them, give them their shares. Pilot project hopping leads to comparatively high installation costs, so stop doing this pilot here, make a master plan. We need a high level of engineering, but this is what your country will help to jump to a next scientific level, because those young academics, they will have a job in a very, very nice environment. Applied research needed, well, we need vocational and unvocational training, academic training. Many, many jobs will be created. We have 400,000 new jobs in Germany just by renewable energies, and it's very difficult to create a job in Germany, very expensive. And we'll have decentralized installations. Communities, villages will have a benefit from this, so we can give them something back for their hard agricultural work. So what would I recommend? Come to the end. A nationwide implementation map based on a potential map, what you have already, from potential to installation. National investment plan with return on investment and net present value aspects. National and regional added value calculation. And value added calculation helps to convince politicians. It's not just cash in the pocket, it's a value you get for a nation. Macroeconomic, microeconomic, environmental, social. This convinces many people. Our experience from a lot of political lobbying work, vocational academic training, you must train people because these systems must be operated. That is a must, and it's good for your young people in the country. Organize funds. Money must be organized, but there is so much money right now, even low interest money in the world. It's running around in the world and looking for nice projects. You have so many nice projects. Pay by performance, don't subsidize renewable energies. It's really hurting my back and giving me a headache, seeing subsidies for renewables. Pay by performance. Pay by kilowatt hour. Make the people responsible for what they are doing, like net metering or feed-in tariffs, and monitor the results every year. That's what we are doing in Germany and trying to readjust the system. Well, Nelson Mandela once said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Well, smart guy. So do it and let the fossils rest in peace. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Good evening to you all. Reverences, His Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam and Professor Peter Heck and Professor Gunapala Nanayakara, Dr. Suren Batagoda, Dr. Nilanthi Bandara and Professor Tissu Vitarana, His Excellency High Commissioner of India Mr. Singh, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. It is real happiness and great honor for us to welcome Your Excellency to this International Energy Symposium as the chief guest. The Sri Lanka and India have led long friendly association, and we are always working on a common aim of developing our nation since independence. We have recently formulated the cabinet-approved Sri Lanka Energy Sector Development Plan for a knowledge-based economy 2015 to 2025. The plan envisages a mid-term target of Sri Lanka becoming self-sufficient in energy and long-term target of meeting 100% of our energy needs through renewables. We have identified eight trust areas under this plan dealing with policy, green energy, conservation, customer satisfaction, infrastructure development, good governance, innovative financing, and research and development. We understand that research and development is the key to energy sector development. In this background, we are planning this International Energy Symposium on a very special theme, which is on energy challenges in the knowledge economy, in order to make conducive environment for our engineers and scientists to actively participate in our drive towards sustainable economic prosperity. The creative ability of human being was brought about by human brain power blended together with actions of human genes. This is by recursive thoughts, agriculture and farming, controlling fire and bioenergy, exchange of goods and services similar to barter system, communities and systems of governments. Knowledge-based society is the heritage of Asia. Asians, especially South Asians, never achieved economic development by way of violence and dominance over others, whereas on the contrary, the Western world was so. The doctrine inherent with the religious background in Asia was based on non-violence and harmony with nature through eco-friendly system, which is part of our proud heritage. Knowledge economy-based development drive is the prime move of the postmodern era. We have identified 5 preconditions for achieving a knowledge-based economy, namely technological, economic prosperity, environmental preservation, development and social equity, and individual happiness. When we talk about technological condition, during the first phase of the Industrial Revolution, which was started around 1760, manpower multiplication was the prime driving force, and during the second phase from 1860, manpower was replaced by fossil fuel, and fossil fuel era had begun. The third phase, which is called the information age, started in 1960s and is still continuing, where brain power multiplication was the driving force of the development. Since 1980s, the concept of a new green energy has surfaced, and in the modern era, it is the synergy between manpower multiplication, brain power multiplication, and new green energy development. In the economic front, during the post-imperialist period, we have tried communism and capitalism or a mixture of both, and since 1990, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, everyone tried to market-driven economy as their key strategy for development. There are three strategies to achieve economic growth, namely production factor-driven, investment or efficiency-driven, and innovation-driven strategies. We have passed both factor-driven and investment-driven phases and entering into the innovation-driven phase. Therefore, at this stage, it is essential for us to evaluate our advancement in both knowledge and innovative aspects of a country. Ladies and gentlemen, Sri Lanka's knowledge economy index is 3.63 and innovation index is 3.06, where for comparison purpose that of South Korea are 7.97 and 8.80 respectively. Out of 143 countries, Sri Lanka ranks 105th position in the global innovative index, whereas we stand at 101 for the knowledge economy index. This shows how much we are lagging behind compared to the rest of the world. Next important condition would be our environment, where environmental preservation is essential for the survival of the humankind. What is important here is to reduce the deficit between biocapacity and ecological footprint, minimizing pollution of our air, soil, water, and global warming, which is a real threat to the mere existence of the humankind. Therefore, it is essential for us to live in a harmony with the nature and to develop sustainably. What we are now require is a sustainable development in such a way that dynamic equilibrium of environment will be preserved for generations to come. Development itself is conditional, and there are various stages of development paradigms, like primordial development, where our ancestors and aborigines, especially the Vedda community, have lived without change in the environment. Next phase was coexistence development, where our ancient civilization centered on cities like Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa can be taken as classic examples. However, in contrast, the Western development paradigm was based on an invasive principle where the humankind used to change the dynamic equilibrium of our environment, especially after the Second World War. Final condition that needs to be fulfilled for a knowledge-based economy is equity in all aspects, that is equity between individuals and communities, region, and continents. Aforementioned 5 conditions are essential for us to build a more sustainable and more equitable world. According to the Asian doctrine, spiritual path and the proper balance between body and mind also makes the way forward to development. In the European secular civilization context, the process of development has evolved from manpower, passed through machine power, and has now come to information and communication power. It is evident that the synergy for further development in the Western world has been emerged out of the development of humankind was achieved starting from the Industrial Revolution up to the present day. In this scenario, Asian continent, especially South Asia, was lagging behind the Western world for many reasons until the recent past. In contrast, in the present day context, Indian Ocean is becoming a major hub in the New World Order with many lessons to learn from countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. And the giants like China and India are now changing the Western dominant world order. Main contributing factor in the new development is the growth led by Asia, which is known to be emerging Asia. Asia is slowly and steadily becoming the prime mover and shaper of the new world order. In this scenario, Indian Ocean will be a powerful ocean, and Sri Lanka on the middle of it has a strategic importance in all aspects. In the local context, as a country, we have reached comparable achievement in the space of education, health, life expectancy, infrastructure, women empowerment, etc. 2 most important hurdles we are now facing are the energy security and middle income trap. We should strive to achieve the status of higher income country in the near future. To achieve this, we need to find our own model based on the following 4 pillars. Firstly, we want to achieve economic prosperity through sustainable development, not a bubble-driven economy as in the recent past. Because at the end of the day, the bubble will certainly burst, and we are experiencing it now. Secondly, we need to preserve our environment with ecological balance and biodiversity. Social equity also should play a major role, as there must be a just and equitable society irrespective of class, creed, ethnicity, region, or race. Finally, individual happiness is what matters most. Without happiness, the human beings as a species cannot survive. These four pillars are essential for balanced economic and social prosperity of a nation. In conclusion, I fervently hope that this symposium will pave the way for a new beginning of our scientific community to assist us in this great endeavor. I thank you.
A recipient of the Bharat Ratna, the highest civilian honor award of the Republic of India, given in recognition of his exceptional service and performance of the highest order. I feel humbled and overwhelmed to introduce such a great man to you. To do it in only few minutes is impossible. I feel I need a full month. In few words, Dr. Abdul Kalam is a scientist, an inventor, an author, a teacher, a leader, a statesman, an intellectual figure, international figure, an icon for youth, and a great man in every respect of the world. His knowledge, wisdom, charisma, and experience is a true inspiration for all the people worldwide. He has a special affection for the youth. Dr. Abdul Kalam, in brief, studied physics and aerospace engineering, 40 years as a scientist and science administrator, secretary of the Defense Research and Development Organization since 1992 to 1999. Indian Space Research Organization, project director of India's first satellite launch vehicle SLV-3, which successfully deployed the Rohini satellite in near Earth's orbit in July 1980. Known as the Missile Man of India, 1998 developed the low-cost Kalam Raju coronary stent, 11th President of India, 2002 to 2007. Affectionately known as the People President. Currently a visiting professor at Indian Institute of Management, Shillong, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, many. In May 2012, Dr. Abdul Kalam launched his mission for the youth of the nation called What Can I Give? Moment, with the central theme to defeat corruption. He also has interest in writing poetry and in playing Veenai, a South Indian string instrument. He was nominated in 2003 and 2006 for the MTV Youth Icon of the Year. In the 2011 Hindi film, I Am Kalam, he is portrayed as an extremely positive influence to a poor but bright boy named Chottu, who renames himself Kalam in honor of his idol. Author of many books, we are honored to have the Honorable His Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam kindly accept and inspire us today with talk about science, technology, and our future prospect as citizen of Sri Lanka.
Friends, today, out of the best auditorium in Colombo, I was addressing 1,500 students from different parts of the Colombo. They have come from schools and colleges. After my talk, I gave the empowering the youth. Now one girl student got up. She asked me a question, number of questions. One question was interesting for today's meeting. She asked me, Mr. Kalam, can you tell me that renewable energy, 100% is it possible in any part of the world? And this question, beautiful question from a young student, I am going to answer that question in my talk. Because that's a beautiful question, and I'm a believer of completely eliminating the fossil fuel. Even if we don't eliminate, it will get eliminated. Because it is coming from the earth, it will stay up more than about 50 years it may survive. So we have to go for clean energy. And the policy of Sri Lanka, that we should go for clean energy, I am completely 100%. I am advocating energy independence for the whole world. Friends, before I begin my address, let me share an experience with all of you. Friends, last year, September, I'm a professor in the Peking University in China. When I was conducting a course at Peking University in Beijing, I gave 3 lectures to the student, beside many other meetings and assignments. On the first day of my visit, when I was traveling in a car, from the hotel to the Peking University campus, I noticed something unique on the road. I saw that all the cars ended in only odd number digits. Every car was odd number digit, 01, 03, 05, like that it was going on. So I asked the Peking University host, many professors, they asked, why today I saw everywhere odd number cars only? Why? Professor replied, today only odd number cars are permitted to be driven. I asked why. The reason given to me was, my visit was coincided with the APEC, that means Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, 5 days. To prepare for the summit, Beijing has declared that only odd number permitted on the road on one day and even number on the following day. In this way, they removed the pollution from half of the cars during the period. They also imposed restriction on the heavy polluting industries to reduce the pollution during the period Pacific Leaders Conference. When I checked the pollution figures, I noticed that it had reduced to half during the period of the conference, making the city clean, and healthier. Of course, friends, China can do that. And whether Sri Lanka and India, we can put such restriction, I don't know. Difficult to impose such a law. However, message I want to give you, when you come to this conference hall, every one of you would have come in the bus or car. Remember, 1 liter of petrol or diesel generate 2 kilograms of carbon dioxide. The whole world generates about a year 30 gigatons of carbon dioxide. However, if through technology, through biofuels, through electric cars, we can remove the pollution for even half the total cars in our cities, We can also achieve a cleaner, greener, healthier ecosystem for all. That's what I was conveying to Honorable Minister. Today, when I was looking out from my hotel window on the 19th floor, I saw a long jam of cars stuck on the Galley Road. It's called Galley Road, Gold Road. I wondered how much emission these cars would be causing even without moving much. This is a common sight almost every major city of the world, not only your city, our city also. Now we need to address this situation, as every liter of a petrol burned generate 2.3 kilogram of CO2, carbon dioxide, which harms the environment, everybody knows. Today, when I am with all the experts in the domain, I would discuss some thoughts on the solution for such issue. I understand you have representatives of various industries, CEOs, and various government officials. So I'm going to talk to you, address at this symposium on energy challenges in the knowledge economy in the beautiful city of Colombo. I want to talk to you. I'm happy to know that this symposium is organized by my friend, Ministry of Power and Energy, Sri Lanka, which envisages organizing the scientific knowledge base for plan implementation and will provide the forum for Sri Lankan and invited expert in the field to discuss, debate, and share futuristic knowledge relevant to the challenges that the nation facing in the evolving economy. Now, this is in line with the mega trend of our times, where steady supply of energy is being replaced by a new paradigm which recognizes two fundamentally new energy transformations: replacing oil with electricity in transportation, replacing high carbon, finite supply coal and natural gas with renewable wind, solar, marine, nuclear, and biomass energies for electricity production. The objective of the symposium is to facilitate a rich exchange of knowledge, I understand, among the energy policymakers, researchers, academia, and industry who seek the solution to problems of energy, economy, and sustainability of sources and the effectiveness in the energy use in the economy. It was visible just now when the Honorable Minister for Power talked about. Honorable Peter Heggs gave one information. I don't know how many of you noticed that information. He said the wealth of the village should remain in the villages. It's a challenging task for all the nation. Wealth of, for example, you have 12,000 villages in Sri Lanka. At no time you make it urban centers. And I am also against it partly. So it is essential. The villages' wealth should remain. That's what Professor Peter said. It's a beautiful statement. Now, such an exchange platform of knowledge, what you are doing today, is indeed the need of today. And I also learned for a few minutes. I'm sitting here. Every minute I was learning. When the earth faces many challenges due to man-made and natural causes, and humanity strive to keep their home planet safe and pollution. My greetings to all of you. I would like to share my thoughts on the topic SAARC Energy Independence Platform, because SAARC nation we are. Basically almost same culture, same environment, same way of life. And I felt we have to make it SAARC very active, like European Union Parliament. Today when I met your President and Prime Minister, that's the topic I discussed. Dear friends, I will share with you the topic I am going to talk next 15 minutes. SARC in an energy independence platform for livable planet Earth. Livable planet Earth. If the planet does not live, we cannot live. 7 billion people cannot live. So our major thrust going to be how do you make our planet livable? Every day when you are generating CO2 and polluting, remember our various layer of atmosphere is get polluted. That's why topic I have selected, livable planet Earth SARC energy independence platform. Friends, I would like to share with you one important aspect of energy independence. I am propagator of energy independence, from energy security to energy independence. 86% of the total energy produced comes from fossil fuel today. Of course, a lot of politics also there. The fossil fuel lovers are there. And then the around 14% comes from the renewable energy, 14%, and nuclear sector. In this situation, it is essential to find innovative methods to reduce the consumption of the electric power from fossil fuel and increase the deployment of a renewable energy system. I know geography of Sri Lanka. All round sea for you. Always sea will help you. And also sea power and wind power and energy. Sun is shining, India and Sri Lanka always shining. So in India, we are already working on adapting certain innovative methods to convert certain important segments for improving the efficiency of electric power usage from the fossil fuel and increase the use of renewable energy system. For example, India has 600 million mobile users. Now it may have become 800. And 250,000 cell phone towers. You are also having 250,000 cell phone towers we have in India. You will have less number, which consumes nearly 2 billion liters of diesel for power. It consumes 2 billion liters of diesel power. If we convert this installation to solar powered system, we save about $1.7 billion offset, $5 billion of CO2 emission and gain carbon credit. And the next, if we translation for 600 villages where 700 million people live into solar powered homes, I am promoter of solar powered homes and street lights, we may offset around 60% of the fossil fuel usage in that sector. In these two areas alone, we can make a big change. With this background of energy saving, in India I have been advocating to convert the cities into carbon neutral cities. Of course I visited Colombo number of times. When I visit your city, and I feel, I may also suggest Energy Symposium Sri Lanka to adapt such experience, including transforming Colombo and other Sri Lankan cities into carbon neutral cities, which will create a new momentum in this mission globally. These are some of the innovative methods to reduce the consumption of fossil fuel usage and increase the deployment of renewable energy sources. I hope these steps will lead us towards achieving energy independence in a much faster way. Friends, I came from an island, Rameshwaram. I used to come to Talaimannar when I was a young student to see my uncle here in Anuradhapura. I come from island Rameshwaram in the southern part of India, not from far off from here. I was born in Rameshwaram, studied there, and lived with full connectivity during the last 83 years. I was asking myself what my island has taught me. You are a big island. I come from a small island. Great experience of sea travel, great experience of climbing over sandy hills, sailing in my brother's Tony, that is fishing boat, and bringing boats full of seasonal tiny fishes. Buyers from many parts of the world used to queue up for getting such fresh fish at the seashore. Also, I have seen real life experience how my father built a passenger sailboat, about 40 passengers capacity. Part by part with two expert carpenters. He is the designer, but two carpenters helped him. When this boat was launched on a full moon day, it brought great joy in our family. This passenger boat was a source of income to our family and was responsible. Your sea and our sea almost same. This passenger boat was a source of income to our family and responsible for funding my education up to the college level. I have also seen this happiness transformed into great loss. When the heavy cyclone hit Rameshwaram Island in 60s, the same sailboat which gave happiness to our family went into pieces due to the fury of cyclone. But we all recovered fast. The great boatman of Rameshwaram Island was Janab Jainullah Abdeen, my father. Lived for 103 years and my mother 98 years. So friends, we are all children of the island. Lived near sea, lived on the sea, and my career as a rocket and missile technology for nearly 40 years was enriched by the eastern Tumba and western Sriharikota sea coast, both of them sea coast, eastern sea coast. With my island home background, my career including my presidential visit to islands of my nation, visits of Iceland, Philippines, Sri Lanka, among many others. And with my presence here today in Sri Lanka, I was asking myself, what unique experience islands have taught me, which I can share with this great audience assembled here. I would like to recite a poem composed in Tamil during my visit at tsunami-affected Andaman Nicobar Island. We had a heavy loss during the tsunami. And I was talking to the citizen who got affected by tsunami in Nicobar, how to talk to them. I cannot make a big speech. So I gave a poem in Tamil that is called Sea Waves. The meaning is, we are children of sea waves. Sri Lanka and part of our three sides, we are surrounded in India. So we three part of it. And we are the children of, the poem goes like this. We are the children of sea waves. Sea waves are our friends. When they become angry, sea waves give us challenges. God has given us courage to challenge the sea waves. And we succeed when God for us, who can be against? Of course, tsunami affected Sri Lanka also partly. So when I visited Iceland recently, which I was well known for volcanoes, Iceland well known for volcanoes and earthquakes, I could see the islanders have learned to evolve a lifestyle to live happily and meet the challenges whenever it comes. This volcanic island is blessed with hot springs. The steam of hot spring is converted into electricity. And the hot water is supplied for heating houses and buildings throughout the island, Iceland. The technology has been developed to make their lives adequately safe through the research efforts for forecasting the occurrence of volcanoes and earthquakes well before they occur. This island nation, Iceland, known for the highest per capita income in Europe. This income from high sea fishing. High sea fishing using large fishing trawlers, which has a provision for storing fresh fish, processing the fish, packaging and marketing in the high sea itself. Apart from fishing contribution, per capita income comes from IT and pharma industry in Iceland. Also, with the frequent occurrence of natural disasters like volcano eruption and earthquake, At any time of place, the capital city, Reykjavik has a disaster management control center which functions round the clock and provide disaster management support and prepare the nation through its nationwide network. While Philippines is often affected by nature's fury like that, similarly I witnessed. It is all well known that islanders throughout the world have lived a very organized life, have mastered the art of self-contained life styles in order to overcome the possible isolation created by inaccessibility. An island's life is completely twinned with the nature. They have learned well to manage as they go to terms of food, energy, and water. Friend, the islanders very often live by abundant resources that the sea provides them and use the natural beauty of their island as a destination for many tourists to throng these places. Now, I am come to the subject. As you are aware, there is a continuous depletion of fossil material, derived oil, gas, and also after a few hundred years, few decades, oil will vanish, few hundred years, coal resources as predicted by World Energy Forum. Also, there is a continuous fluctuation of the cost of crude oil. In fact, presence of oil in the nation and business of the oil is becoming a liability to the oil nation instead of prosperity for the reasons of changing geopolitical dimension. It led to many wars which the world is witnessing so far. This changing scenario has made me to think energy independence. Inequality in the per capita consumption of the power leads to unsustainable development. Hence, for every nation, it is imperative to achieve energy independence. Every nation, we have to achieve, imperative to achieve energy independence from fossil fuel. The world consumes more than 91 million barrels of petroleum per day. Collectively as the world, we are not only paying for the coal of fuel, but also paying for the continuous environment degradation. The solution to this problem is achieving energy independence by framing an integrated policy action for climate change mitigation in energy. Let me share some thoughts about the global energy independence by 2030, another 15 years' time. Many countries have to go for the energy independence, which is just 15 years away. The Energy Vision 2030 is three-dimensional. First is to ensure the affordability in access to quality energy for all. Second is to ensure that the dependence on depleting fossil fuels is minimized, thereby giving stability to energy supply. Third, it has to be balanced against the environment aspect by stressing the development of green energy, thereby giving cleanliness in our energy. If you look at the source of energy and its consumption for typical nation, according to Professor Ed Fredkin, we can get ample clues for energy independence. Petroleum, natural gas, and coal together contribute to nearly 85% of the total energy produced today. The contribution for renewable energy, nuclear are 6.1 and 8.1. On the consumption front, electric power still contributes to 39%, while industrial transportation, road transportation contribute 20% and 28% of the consumption. Today, it looks like a distant dream to increase the source of energy from nuclear, biofuel, renewables to about 50%, make them economical. Hence, any policy on energy independence should concentrate more on energy efficiency, particularly in the energy consumed in the transportation, industrial, electric power generation, which between the consume more than 88% of the energy. The energy independence vision has to be global in its implementation and priority to all nations in the world. Number one, improving energy efficiency. Number two, dependence on fossil fuel as a primary energy source to be brought under 50% in 10 years' time. replacement of a petroleum as a primary fuel source for transport by less carbon emitting or completely carbon neutral renewable fuels. This would require an urgent thrust on research, development, and deployment of solutions such as solar, wind, hydro, biofuel, nuclear, and other forms of green energy. Reducing net emission per unit energy consumption to half of the current rate, which means from the current 1.3 kg of CO2 per watt of a power per year to less than half, 0.65 kilogram of CO2 per watt of power per year. Promoting distributed energy system for a small size for the domestic use of mid sizes in the few megawatt range for industrial use using solar, bio, and wood gasification and other locally relevant forms of renewable energy sources. Promotion of rooftop-based solar power generation, which I am advocating in my country, thereby make every household self-reliant in its energy equipment. International collaboration promoting green energy development methods with seamless flow of ideas and technologies. Friends, the alternate sources energy, I have solar power, very obvious. The 100 megawatt size small solar power station, number of them we have to build in every part of the country. The potential of the solar energy on the global arena is immense. It is documented that concentrating solar power plants built on less than 0.3% of the desert of North Africa and in Middle East to generate entire European region. Poverty and Europe. India has launched a Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Power Mission for generating 20,000 megawatt of power through solar energy by year 2020. Now they have doubled it out. This program is implemented in 3 stages. The next is nuclear power. Nuclear power generation has been given the thrust by use of uranium-based fuel. However, there will be manifold requirement due to increase in nuclear power generation, even to attain a reasonable degree of energy independence. We need to develop technologies for a wider spectrum of fissile material found around the world. For example, India alone has 1/4 of the world's thorium reserves. Sri Lanka, with its long coastal line, may have a thorium reserves and reserves of other fissile material which can be a source of power generation in the future. Now, friends, our target of 2030 should be to increase the combined contribution of nuclear renewable resources from its present level of 14% to 45%. The increasing demand of energy that is dedicated by the economic growth should be met by increasing efficiency of energy usage, particularly transportation, electric power generation. Use of hydrogen is another alternative. Now, energy independence as a global mission. Now, let me explain how India has used hard cooperation, that is, between the nation. Let me share an example. Pan-African E-Network, International Social Responsibility. During the year 2003 and 2004, as the President of India, I visited African countries such as Sudan, Tanzania, Zanzibar, South Africa. I addressed the Pan-African Parliament on 16 September 2004 at Johannesburg, South Africa, which was attended by heads of 53 member countries of African Union. Based on my study of the communication, healthcare, and education needs of the African countries, I proposed to the Parliament, African Parliament, concept of creating Pan-African E-Network for providing seamless integrated satellite, fiber optic, and wireless networking connecting 53 African nations. This initiative was accepted by the African Union at RIGHT project fulfilled the MDG of Africa. The Pan-African E-Network project was estimated to cost out $125 million for India. And it has gone to universities, hospitals, and 53 African nations almost connected now. And now, friends, Pan-African E-Network is an enabler which is cascading the effect on the socio-economic development of many developing nations. It is possible for India with core competence in multiple fields to work with many countries in a joint venture mode for bringing together multiple core competence of partnering nations. Now I'm going to finally conclude with SARC Energy Independence Platforms. I call it SARC Energy Independence. That means no fossil fuel, SARC Energy Independence. The challenge of reducing our dependence on fossil fuel and conserving the environment is a global challenge, which would necessarily require global platform where different nations can bring their core competencies to achieve the cost-effective product and services to an international audience. Energy independence thus has to be a shared mission. All participating countries and societies, each working according to their core competence. Let me visualize one such platform which can emanate between India and Sri Lanka and all the SARC nations, which together represent 1/5 of the humanity, cover all bio and climate zones, represent diversity of geographies and culture. I call it SARC Energy Platform. I was reading about the various initiatives in green energy sector which have been undertaken by Sri Lanka. Nice booklet has come, including various activities like research, finance, execution, maintenance of clean source of energy. Similarly, in India, we are pursuing the various missions from both public and private sector towards achieving energy independence. These include development and deployment of solar, wind, nuclear, hydel, and you are very good in hydel also, and bio-based sources of power at both the domestic and commercial levels. Can all these initiatives from India and Sri Lanka and other SARC nations be brought together at a common knowledge sharing platform, synergized according to the unique core competencies and marketed across diverse arenas? Such an integrated international platform for research, development, and implementation solution for energy independence using green sources need to be evolved. Let me share some thoughts about the areas of operation SARC Energy Independence Platform, which will facilitate the achievement of energy independence for all the SARC nations by 2030, another 15 years' time. First one, high circulation, low intensity products. The first segment of the product which would come out of the venture would be domestic application of or low intensity commercial application system, which could enlarge scale and cost effective manner. India, with 750 million rural population and with a growing energy demand, has a huge market for such cost effective green energy devices. Joint research and development are the key aspects. Second one, high energy green power plants. One of the biggest challenge in green source of power is the need to develop better efficiency in all weather robustness. Solar cells today have an efficiency less than 30%, which should be improved. SARC Energy Independent Platform, through the joint partnership of SARC governments, can consider creating a research fund of $100 million so that these which can support innovative product development in academic institutions, research laboratories, and private sector. The next one, establishing provide green practices. SARC Energy Independent Platform will also act as a knowledge giver to all these public, private sector, industrial, commercial units. The next one, integrated products. The SARC Energy Independence Platform can also be a pioneer in integrating key societal application with green energy requirements. Then finally, I have recommended SARC Think Tank. The core competence of experience of each country can be synergized in activities like sharing, accurate meteorological prediction, disaster prevention, and mitigation efforts. From thus the SARC Energy Independent Platform 2030 will be a mission mode partnership with proper funding, which could stimulate research, development, marketing, deployment, and maintenance of a customized and cost-effective solution. So, friends, in conclusion, green energy mission for Sri Lanka. Friends, historically, there has been a distinct correlation between energy availability and the economic prosperity of a nation or a society. In the future, the emerging trend is that there is a strong bond between the quality of energy and the environment. Keeping in this mind, I would like to suggest the following mission which can be taken up by the government and private sector of Sri Lanka. Number one, Sri Lanka should have a clean energy mission to achieve before 2030. Fortunately, I saw a document you have for graduating from the fossil fuel to renewable energy. Second one, India is busy in establishing a sustainable development system, particularly for the development of 600,000 villages through what is called PURA, providing urban amenities rural area. Sri Lanka has got 14,000 villages. I am sure Sri Lanka can be a partner in India's sustainable development. They can be spread to Sri Lanka. It is indeed an economic proposition related to green technology and application. India has launched 2 ocean satellites to study dynamics of sea and atmosphere. Scientists and technologists and strategic both countries, India and Sri Lanka, can plan and build jointly an ocean satellite between India and Sri Lanka. This ocean satellite can be a research system for planning execution of green nation, green atmosphere, linking oceans of our regions. I visualize our both nations investing research and development mission for green home, green fuel, green transport system, and above all, green habitat for the millions of people. This can come about also a strong academic tie-up between the nations. Sri Lanka can pioneer work on developing biofuel from coconut oil or jatropha to power the transportation sector. Transport sector releases a lot of CO2. India has been working in this domain for quite some time with some breakthrough. Recently, an experiment proved to produce 760 liters of biofuel from 10,000 coconuts, which can replace the diesel in standard cars. The cost of generating this coconut biofuel is expected to be about $0.50 per liter. I am sure the Energy Symposium of Sri Lanka today, what we are having, will certainly succeed its clean energy mission and creation of a green jobs. The present climate change considerations posing a great challenge to the society as a whole, and I am confident collectively we will find innovative solution to the global problem through SARC Energy Independence Platform. I am sure with our collective vision and action, India and Sri Lanka, we can ensure prosperity without poverty, peace without fear of war, and a happy place to the life of all citizens of the nation. My best wishes for all your future endeavors. May God bless you all, friends.
His Excellency Dr. Abdul Kalam, the Honorable Minister of Power and Energy, Secretary, Ministry of Power and Energy, Professor Heck, Professor Bandara, His Excellencies, the professionals, academics, and the business leaders who are gathered here, and my friends. Now, after a big meal, you are wondering whether to have a dessert or not. I won't be very long, but my task, as I have been advised by the steering committee, is to make the concluding remarks and say what the future steps would be and propose a vote of thanks. I observe 2 important remarks that I have to make. These are very important remarks with regard to the implementation of the strategies and the policies of the energy sector. In February this year, we had a strategy workshop where the current policy was formulated, and then it was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. Thereafter, the Honorable Minister advised the Ministry and the other organizations under the Ministry to consider the ways in which the strategic transformations that have been earmarked can be realized. To realize the energy goals of 2030, we believe that the symposium will produce ideas with regard to two areas in particular. First is that the current institutions that we have will not be necessary by the year 2030. We will not need a petroleum corporation in the current form. We will not need an electricity board in the current form. We will need, however, new institutions in the new energy areas, renewable energy areas, so that these institutions must be prepared in order to transform themselves. If that does not happen, there will not be a realization of our goals. Secondly, these institutions must learn to manage knowledge. That is why we included in our theme that we are developing the strategy in a knowledge economy. A lot of institutions do not understand knowledge management. Search, absorption, internalization, sharing, and application of new knowledge is not being managed. When this symposium was being organized, I asked one of my doctoral candidates who is doing research on innovation in Sri Lanka to make a presentation to the symposium. He said, "Sir, if I do this presentation, I might lose my job." Then I asked why. "Sir, my boss is unaware that I am doing a PhD. If he knows that I am studying further, he might not like me working for him." Now with that, the attitude of our CEOs, I hope there aren't many of that type. If that is the attitude of our CEOs, there cannot be management of knowledge. There cannot be a movement toward a knowledge economy. 2002, the World Bank ranked Sri Lanka among 167 countries as the 87th country in terms of the achievements in the knowledge economy. And today, has Sri Lanka improved or not improved as a knowledge economy? Sri Lanka is ranked today, according to the World Bank, as the 101 nation among 167 countries. So we have gone down. In fact, sir, even India has gone down a little. Now India, under your leadership, when India 2020 was being formulated, you had 600 professionals helping the India National Plan. 600 professionals. Now our attempt is also to make a role for professionals. Professionals must become a stronger part of the government, and that should be the way for good governance. Good governance is not managing everything by one person or a few persons. It is managing the affairs of policy and development by the people who are involved in this. And that is why I think our Honorable Minister fought fearlessly during the last year to bring about the most necessary change. And we, as professionals, are inspired by his leadership. And that is why we want our institutions to transform in the coming years. And finally, the research should not be confined to papers, seminars, discussions, and files. Research must go forward and become important investment projects. And we need to have several other seminars in the future to take forward the good ideas of our research work so that there will be investment by local investors and the foreign investors. And there should be a new industry with enlarged investment in the energy sector. Dr. Samaratunga, who is the Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, is here, and he was talking to me during the early hours today, and he said, we should get together and discuss how the government could put more money, invest in the areas that are necessary for energy achievement of goals. So we have the professionals, we have the readiness, and this is the time for action. So tomorrow, we will be having the technical sessions at the Miloda Academy of Financial Studies at Bristol Street. And today we have about 1,000 people attending this event. And tomorrow there will be 400 attending the technical sessions in 4 concurrent sessions under 6 subject areas. So I invite them, the participants, tomorrow to come early because we want to start at 8:30 at the Academy of Financial Studies. Let me also recognize the presence of Honorable Tisavitarana, who had been a professional in the medical field and in other fields, and our keynote speaker tomorrow, Professor Muttaya from University of Multimedia in Malaysia, University of Multimedia, Malaysia. Welcome. And the presenters have been given guidelines. They must check the email today also. Special guidelines have been given. Please come well prepared so that we can have the most successful concurrent sessions on energy that has ever been mounted in this country. And this was possible because of the leadership of the Honorable Minister. So while I thank him and thank him for inviting Honorable Abdul Kalam to come to Sri Lanka and give this inspiring speech today, and I thank the Secretary of the Ministry of Power and Energy, Dr. Batagoda, without whose support and the involvement, this was not a possibility. And then Professor Nilantha Bandara, Professor of Environmental Sciences of the University of Sri Jawatanapura, who handled the entire proceedings of the technical work for tomorrow. And my colleagues of the steering committee, Vidya Amarapala, I think he did not sleep enough during the last few days. And then Chamath De Silva, who has been running around and networking to make this happen. And there are many others I want to thank, but I know now you are waiting not to be thanked, but to be released. So I wish all of you a very good night and hope that we will continue to associate together and work around the strategy of energy transformation for Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.